Smile. Sakusa's birthday special. Dash. You didn't make my sight much better, especially with the stuff I've done, but I appreciate you. Dash. He sighed and sat down on the cold floor of his apartment. Everything is so much more tiring. He gets drained out so easily, though the final outcome is worth it. He took his lighter out from the pocket of his suit along with his fancy cigarette holder, followed by taking a cigar out of the case. He placed it between his lips and leaned back, sighing again as he returned the case back into his pocket. The male's thumb rolled on the spark wheel, letting the fire of the lighter illuminated the dim room. He lit his cigar and inhaled. The male's eyebrows furrowed in frustration. All he wanted was to sleep decent hours, yet his body didn't let him. His job drained so much energy out of him. At this moment he doesn't know why he decided it was a good idea. His body is always itching to have a smoke break, yet he can't. He's always tense knowing he can't do the things he wants. The pay is the only decent thing. He slowly took the cigarette out from his mouth as he exhaled. The smoke flowed out of his nose along with his mouth. He currently hates himself for picking out a job that gives him less time to sleep, though his main job makes his second easier. Fuck life at this point. Is it so hard to get a nap around here? Literally the only thing circling around his mind. He groaned and slowly stood up from the ground. The more tired he is, the uglier he gets. Dash. 6:15 a.m. He yawned as he fixed the vest of his suit in the mirror. He picked up his brush from the counter and began to brush his hair. He soon finished what he needed to do in the bathroom and made way to his kitchen. He walked over to the refrigerator and opened it. His eye searched through the fridge. He soon found what he was looking for and grabbed the bottle. He stood up straight and closed the fridge door with his hip. He took a cup out from the cabinet and poured his juice inside, taking a sip and groaning. At this point he's going to end up sleeping on the spot. He downed his whole drink and placed the cup down on the counter, followed by picking up his handbag from beside the table leg. He swung it over his shoulder and picked up his keys from the table. His eyes averted to the cup he just drank from. He didn't feel like cleaning it, even if it was barely anything. Later was always an option for him. He walked towards the door and slipped into his shoes, later opening his front door. He stepped out and quickly closed it behind him, putting his key in and locking the door. He made his way to the elevator and pressed the down button. The elevator soon came to his floor. The door opened and an elderly man came out. The elderly man smiled at the latter. He didn't understand why the old man would live on the highest floor of their apartment building, though it's not his business, nor does he care much. That man was always easy to talk to. He was like the grandfather everyone always wanted. He greeted the elderly man back and stepped into the elevator. He pressed the basement floor and took a few steps back. The male's eyes stuck to the doors of the elevator as they opened. His eyes averted to the floor indicator to see he was only on floor 15. A woman walked in and smiled at the man. As she walked in she scratched her collarbone, making the collar of her dress shirt show more of her skin. Her breasts were also more visible to the eye. Hello Sakusa. Mr. Sakusa. Miss Azuki. How much she was to drop on her knees and praise the man before her. His voice was just too much for her. Of course. She swore. The male smirked at her. She knows it's irresponsible to have such feelings for a colleague, however she can't help it. The elevator doors closed and they started escalating down. Azuki started humming softly and moving her hips a bit. She felt safe with the latter. However, that wasn't the same for the male. He despised the women. She was beautiful, successful. She was social and extremely good with talking to others. She also knew how to get her way. Exactly what latter hated. Past trauma really takes a toll on people. The elevator doors opened and both of them walked out. The elevator was in a little area with windows along with a single door that led out to the car garage. Azuki walked a tad bit slower, so the latter could walk past her. Her plan worked. The male opened the door for her, along with a small smile. At the moment her knees felt weak. She was literally reliving one of her favorite manhwa. Thank you. It's really no problem. She turned back and gave a smile before the both of them parted ways. He hated faking. Faking to like other people. Faking his kindness. Faking everything. Having a mask on with a huge smile makes things easier for him. He loves what he does. It brings him thrill and joy. However, getting to the point where he loves it is a bit of a pain. For example, feeling the pain of combing your hair when it's tangled, but when you get through all the knots out of your hair you'd be satisfied. Or even when your sink is filled with dishes, you're annoyed, not wanting to clean, yet when you've finished you'd feel better. While walking towards his car he pulled his keys out of his pocket. He pressed the unlock button as he continued to walk closer to his car. He opened the car door and sat down in the driver's seat, later putting the key in the ignition. He closed the car door and turned up the radio. Time to get this show on the road. 7:05 a.m. Sakusa finally arrived at the school. He was preparing everything he needed to before students flooded the lecture hall. Meanwhile he was searching through the drawers for whiteboard markers. He was getting irritated since there were none in sight. He heard a sound coming from the door. His eyes averted towards the door quickly but was only met with Ms. Azuki. Hello again. I hope you don't mind me coming in. Sakusa looked at the woman. His eyes scanned down her whole body. She let down her hair from when he saw her last. Not to mention her guard was completely down. You already let yourself in, you dumb bitch. He mumbled under his breath but soon covered his irritation with a small smile. Of course not. What brings you here? I had accidentally bought more markers than I intended to. She closed the door behind her. She walked towards the desk where Sakusa was standing and placed a box down. I labeled them for you, so it could be easier. She connected her hands behind her back and smiled. Sakusa looked down at the box and opened it. The markers were really labeled. No one had ever been this considerate to him. His eyes became watery. A wave of sadness yet happiness filled his body. However, that was only for a brief second. He snapped out of his thoughts and returned to his neutral expression. He had to get it in his head that no one would truly care about him. Thoughts filled his head how Azuki was mocking him for being colorblind. He's been colorblind ever since birth. He has never seen color in his life. Sakusa was in the extremely rare category. He lives in a world where he can only see shades such as gray, white and black. He was diagnosed with achromatopsia, although it never bothered him. He felt like he was always drowning in darkness. He really doesn't know what he's missing out on. Thank you so much. Your timing is amazing. I couldn't find any. Sakusa picked up the box of markers and walked behind the desk. He pulled out the drawer and placed the box inside. It's really no problem. I wanted to help you since you're so kind to me. I really appreciate it. Just you're the best. Sakusa smiled and looked up at her with admiration, or at least tried to. She blushed and returned the smile. The latter was really a dream in her eyes. The both of them stood there staring at each other before Azuki's phone rang. She smiled apology and answered the call, picking her phone up to her ear. Though Sakusa couldn't hear what was on the other side of the phone, Azuki answering with yes a number of times along with ending the conversation with understood gave him an idea what the call was about. I'm sorry, I have to meet with Mr. Dasuki. She smiled once again before walking towards the exit of the room. As she was about to touch the doorknob she turned around and waved at Sakusa, which he returned. He sighed and sat back at his desk. He started in 25 minutes. He had only chosen to do morning lectures because of the time being so early. He had thought less people would attend but he wasn't so lucky. So many individuals were present at his lectures. He sighed once again and rolled his chair back. He really wondered what his next move should be. Azuki would be perfect, yet at the same time she wouldn't. Picking someone with completely no relations to him would be smarter. Azuki is stupid for liking him, at least in his eyes. It does her no good to have such feelings for him. Azuki's like a simping teen in an adult woman's body. She's very energetic. You'd need a whole lot of energy to deal with her. Sakusa gets drained even looking at her. He stood up and took the markers back of the drawer and opened the box. He picked up 3 markers that were labeled as red, blue and green. At least she saved him a little trouble. Some students recommended that he labeled all the markers but he's never taken heat. He's really only used black markers. Red or green were the colors that he'd use if he felt like it. He can't see the brightness of these colors, therefore he doesn't care about other people seeing colors in his lectures. Though he had to make himself seem like he wanted to try something new, take people's advice and be really interested in his so-called teacher career. As soon as the clock hit 7:30 students started flooding the lecture hall. They smiled and waved, and he did the exact thing in return. The mood was bright. While he was explaining, many students were impressed that their colorblind professor was handling the colors so well and not mixing them up. The male let out a sigh in relief as he just finished talking about the subject at hand. Teaching English was not fucking easy, especially since it's not his first language. But learning English so well and teaching it well makes people respect him. Let's start on a narrative essay. See where you're at. He smiled at all the people looking back at him. He started cleaning up, indicating that the lecture had just finished. Although Sakusa really wished he just had a lecture hall to himself. It's not bad since the other lecture halls in the college are very different from the others. As people started leaving, a group of people came up to him. Professor? He turned around to be met with a group of people. He smiled and his face softened. Literally everyone standing in front of him looked at him with awe. What can I help you with? Can the narrative essay also be fiction? Anything you want. It can be an incident that has happened or something completely made up. Thank you. I'll always do what I can to help you all. She blushed slightly and smiled, nodded followed by a thank you again before leaving the hall with the rest of her friends. Sakusa put a hand through his hair and looked around. There was still one student there, sleeping. He raised his eyebrow whilst walking up the stairs towards the sleeping person. Had this person really been sleeping the entire time? The fact pissed Sakusa off a bit. Giving lectures takes a lot of energy, so the least people could do is stay awake. He tapped the person's shoulder and got no response. Sakusa's eyebrows furrowed as he grabbed the latter's shoulders and shook him, harder than he wanted to. The latter jolted up and looked at Sakusa with scared eyes. You must have had a nice nap. Sakusa then saw blonde hair sticking out of the latter's hood. He couldn't remember the boy's name. He was only familiar to the eye. I'm sorry, sir. He stood up quickly, almost headbutting his professor in the process. I better get going. I'm sorry again. The blonde walked past the curly head but was stopped. Sakusa put his hand on the latter's shoulder. He smiled warmly, yet there was so much irritation under that smile. Please refresh me on your name. I have a lot going on. Atsumu looked down at his bag that he hasn't touched since he entered the hall. He picked up his bag and held it in both of his hands. Mia. Full name? Mia Atsumu. Sakusa took his hand off the blonde's shoulder and stepped back. He really didn't seem like he was ready to attend college. I mean, the fact he was sleeping peacefully during his first class of the day says a lot. Alright then, you know what to do? Dart. I was just gonna check on the website. Great. He smiled at the blonde, and moved aside for the boy to walk past him. Sakusa watched as the guy quickly ushered out the room. He seemed scared of Sakusa, or maybe intimidated is a better word. The guy literally looked more shitty than Sakusa did. Sakusa feels better knowing people look more tired and all over the place than him. It makes him laugh a bit. A week later. 11:20 p.m. He's not a fan of this, checking every single person's assignment. This isn't high school, but it's recommended that he does this. He started reading everyone's stories. It's not like they're terrible, but most people are missing something. He yawned and stood up from his desk, picking up his laptop and leaving his office. He walked into his kitchen and placed his laptop down onto the kitchen island. He picked up his kettle and filled it with water, plugging it in and turning it on afterwards. He picked up a knife from the knife block and placed it on the island, sitting down afterwards. His body was itching for some action, yet he couldn't do anything entertaining at the moment. He picked up the kitchen knife and stared at it. His pathetic doing this. He slashed his left palm with the knife. He sighed as blood started flowing out soon after. Doing this made him come to his senses, or at least make him not do anything too reckless. He continued to read the essays of his students. There was still nothing interesting. He huffed. He officially hated this professor job. At first he thought the job would be easy, a piece of cake because of his intelligence. In that department it is, but the whole grading thing isn't his style. College students shouldn't need people to grade their shit. Sakusa soon stood up when he remembered he put the kettle on. The curly head took a cup out from the cabinet along with a tea bag, pouring the hot water into the cup moments later. He plopped the tea bag in and sat back down on the stool. The guy didn't even have the energy to make coffee at this point. He continued to stroll through people's essays as he waited for the flavor of the tea to seep into the water. He furrowed his eyebrows as he finished reading someone's essay. It was so shitty and horribly detailed. It was almost like what a middle schooler would write. He scrolled down to the next essay that was handed in. It was the same boy from earlier. Sleeping boy. He clicked his tongue and pressed onto the link where the essay was. There was a disclaimer at the top, the first he'd seen for any students. There were many trigger warnings that didn't matter to Sakusa. The mystery was never solved the correct way. I opened my eyes with a huge headache. I put my hand to my forehead whilst trying to sit up on the bed. I looked to my left where the windows were. The sun was shining through the curtains. I smiled as I heard birds chirping. When I turned to my right, my husband was lying next to me. I frowned as I saw how bad his back was. Did I do all of that? It's not like it matters anyway. At this point I can't even remember what that bastard did to me the night before. I threw the bed covers off me angrily and rushed to the bathroom of our suite. I closed the door much louder than I intended to. I quickly locked the door behind me and sat on the toilet seat. I'm such a mess. I sighed and pulled down my panties since it was the only thing I had on. I looked down and winced in disgust. His sperm was all over it. I could only think how that fucker was so lucky that I had gotten my tubes tied. At this point he would have fucked at least 20 kids in me. In a week alone. I stood up from the toilet seat and walked over to the glass shower. I opened the glass door and turned on the shower, throwing my underwear into the trash afterwards. I walked in the shower and let out a breath in relief as the warm water hit my body. I washed my body thoroughly and came out of the shower. As I wrapped a towel around my body, I heard my husband outside the bathroom door. What do you mean now? I can't. I heard him grumble angrily, although I wasn't really able to hear the voice on the other line. I heard a whine which was most likely from a female. I turned to the mirror and quickly fixed my hair into a bun. I later walked towards the door and unlocked it, opening the door to see my husband looking right back at me. He hung up the phone without saying another word to the other person on the other line. Morning, Christina. He smiled at me and I returned. None of our smiles were real. Good morning, Danny. I walked past him and walked towards my suitcase. I took the clothing I was going to wear for the day and dropped my towel. As I changed I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. That horny little shit. I slipped my shirt over my head and turned to him. As I was pulling my shirt down he walked closer to me. He looked down at me with that same look in his eyes. I sighed as I sat back down on the bed. I should have known better. This wasn't a vacation for me. It was just consist fucking. I told Danny I was tired of fucking every day. I even told him I like slow sex. But what does he do? Go and fuck a staff at the hotel we're at. I want to get rid of him. He's too much for me. I had left the suite to get fresh air and as I was walking back to our suite I heard moaning. This is the third fucking time. I murdered that fucker Danny, blaming it on that other side chick of his. It seemed like him and his side were going through something that enraged her to slash his tires during the night, so blaming her was really a piece of cake. Fuck. He panicked as his laptop died. He raced to his office with his laptop in hand and plugged it in, waiting for it to power on again. The blonde's storyline was impressive compared to the others he's read. For one, it was based on murder. It had countless foul words, not to mention sexual activities was the main topic from the start. Atsumu's essay was rushed. Major and frequent time skips make a story lack the proper details that are needed. If the blonde really took his time the story would have come out wonderful. Sakusa sat down in his chair as his laptop powered on again. The fact that was not like the others was that even though Atsumu was a male he wrote in a narrative perspective of a woman. Atsumu had also used English names, though other people did too. The ones Atsumu chose were the most common. The storyline gave Sakusa a great idea on what he should do next. Winter break. 3:22 a.m. He laughed as he poured the ashes of another down the toilet. He flushed the toilet and looked down at his bloody hands. He shrugged and took his lighter out of his pocket, lighting the cigarette he's had in between his lips since the victim got to his rental home. Sakusa has a whole entire week to do as he pleases. He's a murderer that frames other people, a murderer that is smarter than countless people combined. There's only one thing that makes Sakusa interesting. He only murders females. His mother is at fault for that. His mother was a cold-blooded murderer as well, although she only murdered men because of the trauma of being raped. She thought maybe she could get something good out of being in such a horrible situation, like giving birth to a daughter. However, she was granted with a boy instead. When she found out the gender, it was too late to have an abortion, and his mother wasn't so evil back then to kill him even if it was illegal or not. When Sakusa was born, he was treated horribly. He got no love growing up, and to top it off, he was colorblind. He had never gone to a doctor in his childhood. He just ended up finding out himself with his mother's constant complaints about him not being able to see anything. Sakusa did anything to get away from his mother. There was this library near the old house he used to live in. It was his escape. Every time he would visit the library, there was an elderly man there. One day the man approached him and asked why he was not in school. Sakusa came up with a lie about how his family was not the wealthiest, and from that day the elderly man taught Sakusa all the subjects he needed to know. He really is thankful for that man. Because of that man, he's living his best life. Sakusa had just rented one of those nice houses for a little vacation but got carried away. The house had no security system, so he was able to do whatever he pleases. The rental house was only about an hour away from his city. It was nice and cheap to stay a few days, so a win-win for him. The kill count only went up. It was either Sakusa completely disposing of the body or completely putting the blame on other people with real evidence. During the last days of winter break, Sakusa planned to do one last murder before calming down for a bit. There was this one troublemaker in his area. While coming back from his little voyage, he found the troublemaker in an alley and knocked him out. Sakusa put the mail in his large suitcase and acted as if he was coming home with lots of souvenirs. Once he arrived in his apartment, he dumped the troublemaker in his bathtub and examined all his features. He had black hair like Sakusa's, yet Sakusa couldn't make out the guy's eyes. The latter's body type was very similar to the curly head, so the clothing could be borrowed. All Sakusa had to do was straighten his hair and cover his twin beauty marks. And just like that, his plan was in motion. He targeted a waitress that had tried to hit on him. It was a pathetic effort. He found the girl walking on the sidewalk. Sakusa pulled the hood over his now straightened hair and looked at the girl with a smile. Hey. He made his voice sound more raspy than he wanted, but it didn't matter much to him. The woman smiled at him and waved. Sakusa knows the two of them have seen each other around the area, so getting closer to this woman wouldn't be so hard. Would you like to take a walk with me? Right now? Yes. It's late and you're so beautiful. I want to make sure nothing happens to you. I only had the courage to talk to you now. He smiled and rubbed his neck. The woman blushed and returned the smile. She didn't even see the difference between Sakusa and the unconscious male in his apartment. Sakusa made sure to make the woman feel comfortable with him. They went on a night stroll and even got ice cream. Sakusa took her because he wanted her to see something. He brought her to the back of a store. There were stray cats all over the place. She smiled in awe. They weren't those mean cats. They were cute and cuddly. They are so cute. They are. While the woman was playing with the cats, Sakusa slid his knife out from his coat. He walked up behind the woman and stabbed her left side. The knife cut through his skin and eventually her heart too. And he made sure it was all on camera. His straight hair was poking out of the hood and the clothing he was wearing was the same the troublemaker was wearing previously. He dragged the woman's body behind the dumpster where no cameras could see behind it. If he left and the security camera saw, it would be just how he wanted. He would go around to the other side of the store, down the smaller alley where no cameras were, and pick up the woman and bring her back to his house. If the police couldn't find her body, he would be laughing for days. As he was about to execute his plan, he heard someone walking. He looked over the dumpster. You've got to be kidding me. It was one of his students. The student that fell asleep in his class. The student that actually had a decent storyline for the essay. Sakusa was thinking how he was actually starting to like Atsumu. He watched as all the stray cats ran up to Atsumu and started purring. Atsumu smiled and took a container of cat food out of his pocket. He opened it and left it on the ground for the cats to eat. The cats finished the food in seconds. Atsumu smiled once again and picked up the empty container. He walked over to the dumpster and as he threw the container away, he caught a glimpse of something. He walked behind the dumpster and the shock literally took him to the ground. A woman was lying dead before him. And when he looked up, he saw his professor. His eyes widened in horror as that was the only thing he remembered. Sakusa sighed. He didn't mean to hit Atsumu so hard, and now he has to bring two people home. He groaned as he started searching through the dumpster. Luckily for him, he found a large suitcase that was in great shape. He put all the bloody clothing in the suitcase with the woman along with his shoes. He was wearing his own spare clothes underneath. He fixed his backup clothes and put his hair in a small ponytail. He put unconscious Atsumu on his back and held the suitcase with his right hand. Getting home wasn't a problem for him, well, except for having no shoes on. No one looked at him weirdly for having a boy on his back. Once he arrived home, he put Atsumu on the couch and checked the bathtub. The guy was still out cold. He had the perfect idea on how to ruin this troublemaker's life. He put the suitcase in the bathroom and locked the door. He sighed and walked towards his second bathroom. He showered and did what he needed to do before coming out. He put a towel around his waist and walked into his bedroom that was connected to the bathroom. He changed into a t-shirt and shorts before coming back into the living room. Atsumu was sleeping soundly on his couch now. He sat beside Atsumu and examined him. He looked extremely tired. He stood up and just left Atsumu on the couch. He went to his room and laid on his bed. He was exhausted. 11:54 p.m. Sakusa woke up, feeling more energized. He got out of his bed and went to the bathroom. He washed his face and brushed his teeth before going into the living room to check on Atsumu. The blonde was still sleeping soundly. Sakusa looked at Atsumu suspiciously. Did he accidentally hit Blondie into a coma? He sighed and walked into his kitchen. He opened the fridge and grabbed some eggs, leftover rice and some bell peppers. He turned on the stove and put a pan with oil on the stove top. Sakusa finished cooking and Atsumu still didn't wake up. He ate and even started watching TV, but Atsumu was still out cold. To make sure, he touched Atsumu's pulse. He didn't even notice when he let out a breath of relief when he felt the pulse was still strong. Hours passed and Sakusa was bored. He went from watching TV to reading articles on the internet, then somehow he started working out. During the time he was working out, Atsumu woke up. He looked around. This place didn't look familiar at all. Meanwhile, Sakusa took a break to get a water bottle. He walked out his room and saw Atsumu sitting up looking like a lost puppy. When their eyes met, Atsumu felt fear. His memory was still blurry, but he didn't expect to be in his professor's home. Had a good sleep? Atsumu looked at Sakusa then nodded. He was shy. Sakusa walked towards the couch and sat beside Atsumu. As the blonde was looking at the man before him, all the memories from before started flooding back in. He moved back in fear, but Sakusa grabbed his wrist and held onto him tightly. You remember then? You were tired, so I let you sleep on my back. Anyway, I have something to ask of you. Why was that story of yours rushed and incomplete? Atsumu winced. This guy can't be serious. From all the things that had happened, Atsumu was dumbfounded when Sakusa asked him that. I didn't have time. Fair enough. You might as well take a shower and eat. Okay. Sakusa stood up and Atsumu followed. Sakusa brought Atsumu to his bathroom. He turned on the shower for the blonde and put some clothes on the counter. He really had to get rid of the bugs in his house. If Atsumu was in on his plan, it would make things much easier, but he seems like he would hesitate in situations like that. But at the same time, if he let Atsumu get away, he could easily get him arrested for countless murders. He reheated Atsumu's food and placed it on the kitchen island. While doing that, he heard banging. He groaned and walked towards the source of the banging. Sakusa unlocked the door, and as soon as he opened it, he kicked the latter into the wall of his bathroom. He walked into the bathroom. There was no horrible smell yet. Sakusa placed the guy in the bathtub once again. He walked out the bathroom and closed the door, locking it afterwards. By the time he was done, Atsumu walked out of his room. The both of them sat down on the couch. Atsumu looked down, but it was visible that he was blushing. You'll be staying here now. Atsumu looked at Sakusa with shocked eyes. He didn't expect the latter to say that. But Sakusa thought Atsumu looked at him saying he didn't want to stay. Because you know too much. Am I still able to go outside? The best answer right now is number. Wait. I don't want to report here. Then, Atsumu sat on his knees and his face flushed bright pink. He didn't believe he was doing this. I want a relationship with you. What type? A real one. Is that all? Atsumu nodded. His face was still hot as ever. You have a crush on your professor? Sakusa chuckled and leaned back into the couch. Atsumu was cute. Yes, but he wasn't sure. You sure you want to date this old man? Yeah, not old. But I'm a murderer. They stayed silent for a bit. Sakusa wouldn't mind being with Atsumu. He would get the extra help he wanted. Under one condition. I need to dispose of something, so you'll help. Atsumu frowned. He hoped that Sakusa wished him to sleep in his bed, or help him cook. Okay. Later that same day, Atsumu did what he promised. Atsumu acted like he was leaving after visiting someone in the building. The guy in the bathtub was knocked out cold, so he was easy to transport. Atsumu was rolling the women and the man in suitcases, and it wasn't easy. Some person even insisted on helping him. Atsumu met Sakusa in the car garage and they put the suitcases in the trunk of Sakusa's car. They drove to a far place. It was hours away in an empty farm. The two of them buried the two suitcases and headed back to Sakusa's apartment. Atsumu was scared of it all. Even though he didn't do the main thing, he was still a part of it and it was eating him alive. He's liked his professor since he's been enrolled at his college. He would pick courses he knew Sakusa would be teaching. He had a little obsessive crush. Weeks have passed since Atsumu did what he did. It still haunts him. Being with Sakusa helps him forget about it temporarily, but it always comes back. He's never left Sakusa's apartment once. In his heart he feels like Sakusa doesn't trust him. He hasn't even attended college. No one had gotten a hold of him. His job hadn't heard from him either. He wondered when he would be declared missing. Atsumu even gets sad. At some points he thinks he and Sakusa have a relationship, but at the same time he doesn't. Whenever he gets horny because of Sakusa's doing, he has to take care of it himself. Atsumu was lying down on the couch dreaming about Sakusa again. He dreamed that Sakusa trusted him. He dreamt about Sakusa hugging and kissing him so softly. His dream started getting more intense, causing him to wake up so suddenly. He took deep breaths as his eyes looked around the room. Then his eyes looked down. Not again. After the two of them became a couple, they were closer than ever. Sakusa still didn't really let Atsumu out of the apartment yet since he was now declared a missing person. But when Atsumu found out Sakusa's birthday was coming up, he couldn't help himself. He begged his boyfriend to let him out. Atsumu ended up befriending the elderly man on the same floor as them. Atsumu asked the man where he could find glasses for the colorblind. The elderly man was so moved by how Atsumu wanted his partner to see color. The elderly man then bought the glasses for Atsumu. His now deceased wife was also colorblind. Atsumu couldn't have been more thankful. On the day of Sakusa's birthday, he did what he could to make his boyfriend feel special. During the end of their party, Sakusa was blowing out the candles of his cake. Atsumu was recording on his phone with a large smile. "What do you wish for, Omi?" "For you to stay with me forever." Sakusa blew out his candles and smiled at the camera. "Wait, I have one last gift for you." Atsumu moved the box from behind him to in front of him. Sakusa looked at the box with a raised eyebrow before taking it from Atsumu and unwrapping the wrapping paper. His eyes widened when he saw what was inside. Colorblind glasses? Sakusa ripped the box open like an excited child. He opened the glasses case. It just looked like a normal pair of glasses with tinted lenses. "Try them on." Sakusa slowly put the glasses on his face. He looked around and was amazed. He didn't think this was what people saw on a daily basis. "Sakusa, is this really what you see every day?" He couldn't even contain his tears. He hugged Atsumu tightly. There is truly someone in this world that loves him deeply. "Thank you so much." "You're welcome. Happy birthday again, Omi." Atsumu smiled when he saw Sakusa jumping around. Sakusa truly made him happy. The both of them never got caught. Atsumu distracted Sakusa from committing murders, but Sakusa still did them. Just not as much as before. Atsumu ended up going back to college. No one really noticed he was gone. It was only his other professors. Atsumu and Sakusa didn't really hide their relationship but didn't show it either. Atsumu's trauma from before faded away. He feels safe with Sakusa and he'll do anything for him. Happy birthday.